Your metabolism is not broken, and your health is certainly not in rapid decline if you just follow some procedures. That's the reason why I put this video together today. I'm going to keep it as geek-free as possible. I'm going to mention one word, and in the download, I'll go into more details in that. So if you want to download and find out a little bit more about how this all comes together, and it does, trust me, it really does all come together, then you can download that, get the extra pieces of information. That is a complement to this video. Now, what is the word? The word is mitochondria. That's the only time I'm going to use any kind of geeky terms, because everything else, as I say, is written in the manual here. The idea of this video is to keep it completely practical, and then you'll move through everything as you go, pick and choose in the subjects as you'll find out, the ones that are going to best benefit you. Now, in total, when you start seeing these subjects, as I'll bring up in a moment, they collectively make what I do in my career as a coach all come together. Now, my goal as a coach is to make sure that the person, the individual, the person that comes to me, mostly over the age of 40, is that we do the minimum amount of work possible for the maximum amount of results or the maximum return. And ultimately, it's going to come back to finding the balance point for that individual to get their mitochondria working for them again. And that is ultimately what's going to improve their metabolic health. So I'm really going to break this down. I hope you find it interesting. This really is a fascinating subject, and to be honest, it's butchered almost everywhere on the internet. My job today is to bring it back into layman's terms, make it so that you can actually, i.e., you could do this yourself. Now, you can go through the checklist and do this all yourself, and that's the reason why I put all of these subjects together and given you all the downloads that I have. You can do this all for yourself. However, if you feel like there's too much going on there or you just don't know where to start, that is when you would hire a coach to speed the process, and then you can carry on through. So with all that out of the way, now I'm going to get to the crux of what we're doing here. Now, this video could go on forever, but it's actually not going to, because the way I've done this is to, as I say, break it down into sections. So when we talk about metabolic health, a lot of people will think in general about maybe that it's broken. And then when they come to me and say that, inherently what they mean is they just feel rubbish, they just don't feel good, they don't look good. Nothing seems to feel how it did when you're in your 20s. Now, that's by design, okay? And our goal is to not optimize, to find that sweet spot that makes everything come together and makes all your efforts have a reward. Now, there's the key, because at the moment you may be putting in lots of effort or not, and they are just not materializing. You're not feeling any better. You basically feel like you're on a hamster wheel, okay? So what am I talking about? What I am talking about when we talk about your metabolic health is not necessarily one metric like your weight, calories, etc. It is collectively how you feel. Now, when you know that your metabolic health is improving, there is one key thing, and you're going to see that all on its own right up here, and that is stress. Now, I don't know a 40-year-old plus person who doesn't have stress in their life in one form or another, and I am no exception to that rule. However, what happens when your metabolic health deteriorates, and this is where the mitochondria come in, is that your ability to adapt to those stresses or respond in a practical way, and some of this is just inside your body, you have zero control over it, then your response becomes dampened, weakened, less poor, or less efficient. Now, when someone comes to me and says that their metabolism is broken, or their health feels rubbish, or they just respond to situations really bad, or they're incredibly stressed, I'm going to be looking practically, because ultimately the best way I can help you with any form of information or any form of coaching is practically, is to make sure that the end goal is to get the stress levels down and not increase them through our efforts. Okay, if that sounds like a little bit of a mishmash of information, I'm going to bring it all together right here, right now, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Okay, so over here we have stress. I'm going to leave that up there because that's going to come in and out of our whole conversation. Where those stress levels for you personally is irrelevant. You may have 0 stresses in your life. I have to say that's a very small percentage of the people that I work with, but you may have a lot of stresses in your life. And again, this is how we're going to be able to tackle those. But ultimately, it all comes down to one thing. The very first thing you need to establish is, what is your goal? Now, I could talk about that for 55 minutes. And in fact, I did. And that's where the next video comes in. The goal is the key here. Because if you don't know what your goal is at this time, how are you going to hit the bullseye? How are you going to get things right? You're not. It's that simple. You can be guessing, and guessing leads to missed opportunities and basically wasting your time. I don't want that for you. So the first thing you need to do, I want you to watch the rest of this video first, but the first port of call, regardless of who you are, is to establish your goal. Now, I go about it in a way of finding out what your drive is first, your why, the reason, what it is you want to achieve. Because from there, then you can establish a very powerful goal, and it will be exclusive to you, okay? I'm not going to talk about that anymore. When we get to that point, please go and watch that video. Now, I'm going to talk about a few factors here that ultimately bring your whole metabolism up to speed and healthy again. And even if you feel your metabolism is healthy, or your health in general, your overall wellness is good, but it's not where you want it to be, all of this is still going to apply. So where you are on that scale, be it at rock bottom and life just feels really, really bad and your metabolism's just through the floor, or whether you're just, so-so, this is still going to help you. If you're right the way up here, I'd question why you're watching this video in the first place. So, okay, what's our titles? Now, I could come up with loads of things under metabolism, because metabolism essentially is really, and mitochondria in particular, is the life force of life. If it's not working, you are effectively dead. Okay, how can I put it any other way? If you don't have the energy flowing through the body, then you are effectively dead. Okay, it's not a holistic thing, it's just a practical thing. So as long as that's not you, and again, how would you be watching this? Then you are definitely not broken, because you're not dead. Okay, so that's the good news. The bad news is that maybe things have changed. What you used to do in your 20s, your 30s, not working as well for you, or if it is, it's creating extra stress in your life, or it's just tiring you out and it just feels like it's all too much, okay? Now, what am I talking about? I'm going to have a few things up here. Now, collectively, I could have lots of things up here, but I've broken it down over the years into the most common buckets, or circles in this case, that represent where your struggles are. And you're going to have stronger points and weaker points. And this is how it goes. First off, the first bubble at the top there could be argued to be the most important, is conditioning. Now, I've done a video separate on this, again, so you can go down the procedure there, but remember, do your goal first and then you'll find out. But conditioning is going to have the biggest impact on your metabolic health, how you feel, and your mitochondria, okay? Again, that's the only word I'm going to be using there. If you want more details, click the link below, download the PDF and the audiobook that goes with this. Now, conditioning, essentially, most people will think of that as, well, maybe they will, maybe they won't, as cardio or your heart health. Now, in general, that's actually pretty good, but I would break down conditioning into actually fitness, for example, because that's going to improve your heart health. But ultimately, how you can utilize that fitness so it doesn't detract from your life, i.e. it makes everything in your life better, that is when your conditioning is really, really good, okay? So conditioning is the umbrella term that I like to use. The ideal conditioning doesn't mean that your training is optimal and amazing. It just means it is suffice for you and what you want to achieve. And what is that? That'll be the center point, as you see over here in a moment, once we start filling up all these other circles, and that will be your goal, okay? I'll come back to that in a moment because that's important. So conditioning, okay? I've done a whole video on that. Go watch that later, all right? That really does, it's the biggest bang for your buck, if you like. Now, remember what I said before, that I'm put stress over here. Stress could be over here, but actually I want to keep it over here. Once you start getting your conditioning right, and I'm going to say this on every single point here, okay? If stress is your issue, I don't want to tackle that directly, okay? Because if we tackle your stress, then what we're doing, a bit like taking medicine, is we are treating the symptoms, but we're not treating the cause. Now, the reasons behind your stress levels is over here. So if we tackle these, then by default, we can help your stress, okay? Stick with me, this is really going to make sense. Let's unpack it, and then you'll see it for what it is. So we've got our conditioning first off, okay? So if your stress levels are super high and your conditioning is absolutely terrible, your heart health, etc., we're going to look to tackle that. That's going to be the lowest hanging fruit. We're going to do in a way the minimal amount of effort possible for the maximum amount of return, and that is going to help with your stress. There's number one. Number two, and these aren't in any order now, really, we have nutrition. Now, this won't surprise anyone that nutrition is on there. And again, I've done a separate video and you've got loads of downloads there for nutritional advice. Some of it may surprise you, some of it not so much, okay? You do not need to overthink this. And this is one where I am really going to make something crystal clear. When I say nutrition, that doesn't mean your diet needs to be super amazing, super clean. It needs to be in line with your goal. Now, your goal, as I'll come to in a moment, I'll run out a few scenarios, will determine where your nutrition needs to be. And if that goal is very personal to you, then your nutrition gets a whole lot easier, a whole less confusing, and a whole lot less expensive. Okay, these are all key words. Once you start getting that in check, then your stress levels are going to be impacted in a positive way. Why? Your mitochondria, that is the energy source within your cells, okay? So it's a big deal. It's the battery, something you have plenty of in your teens and in your 20s, deteriorates over time and gets less efficient, okay? We're going to bring that efficiency up. We can do that through nutrition. Again, I've done the video on that. Right, next up, we have strength. Now, wouldn't people consider maybe that strength comes under fitness? It can do, but strength in particular here, I'm talking about gaining enough strength in a way that is going to help you through life, because unfortunately, as we age, one of the determining factors is our strength deteriorates. Our body becomes, okay, I'm going to use a bit of a technical term, our body becomes more catabolic, i.e. it starts to use muscle, which essentially will decrease our strength levels, and tendons and ligaments get tighter and less, just everything becomes less efficient, that then things start to go a little bit wrong. Now, we can train in a smart way to train our strength levels. Now, whether that is important to you depends on your goal. See where I'm going here? It may not be as important to you. And if it isn't, then you would do a very minimal amount of level just to maintain your strength as you work your way towards your goal. So again, this is completely personalized. If this seems like a bit of a puzzle right now, that's because I'm speaking generically. However, you personally will absolutely define your goal, and that will absolutely make definitive answers to what you need to focus on and what you don't need to focus on. So again, that is where you can become your own detective and solve the mystery, so to speak. Okay? This is totally possible. And if you can't be bothered, don't want to use that word really, or you think it's just overwhelming, or you want to speed the process and you want to reduce the risk or the investigation time and increase the rewards, then you will work with a coach who will put all of this together for you. You don't even see the back end of it. You just get the front end result, and then you go through, follow what they're doing in a manageable way that's manageable around your life, and you get the results. So that's where strength comes in. Now, this is the one that's a little bit more open, okay, because strength can come under many things. Now, most people are going to think of that as lifting weights, and it can be, but also it can be through other means like your strength and endurance or your power. Think of plyometrics, etc. These are all strength elements. So I've done a video on that, and you've got downloads on there as well. But this is the one I want to just have a little caveat on. Whatever I put on the downloads, I would need to put 1,000,001 downloads on there in order to cater for everybody. So I've just put some basic stuff, excellent stuff, and also some YouTube links as well for this kind of work that I do, okay? And this is on the strength side. So check that out later on, and I'll explain how you go about this. Next up, and these are quite closely related, we have mobility, but actually you'll see a little slash line there, and pain. Because when I'm really talking about the older person, 40 years plus, inherently what comes with that is some aches, niggles, pains, chronic pain, which is stuff that you've suffered for years, or maybe acute pain. First thing I'll say, if you've got acute pain, you need to go and see a health professional in person, check that stuff out. If you've got chronic pain, then you can look to mobility in order to lower the pain and really start to get the range of motion and the lengthening and strengthening of the problematic areas in your life. And this is really going to work really well for you. So ultimately, I might class this as a movement kind of approach towards improving your overall metabolic health. Because remember, all of these things come under metabolic health. And no surprise, I've done a video there. You can go through the basic checkup as it was from head to toe and see if you've got any aches or pains. You'll probably already be aware, but go through this procedure. And again, I give you some very powerful, but not overwhelming amount of mobility exercises, which definitely have a strengthening element to them as well. So you can check that out as well later, but please don't do that yet. You need to get to the end of this video to see how you are going to piece this together, because it really does come together really well. The last thing here, again, I could have loads here, but the last thing I'm going to have here, because there is all the biggest hitters, is recovery / sleep. Now, none of this is going to surprise you. If you've been on the internet in any way, shape or form, everyone's bombarding you about the importance of sleep. Now, I'm not actually going to tackle it. This is probably one of the things that I would focus on the least first off. Now, that might surprise some people. It's really because I find it not a low-hanging fruit. It tends to be sleep is affected by a multitude of other things. And very much so this one thing, this stress. Stress highly correlates to how good or how poor your sleep is. Okay, so if we are tackling the key areas here, then we would then by default bring up our sleep and recovery qualities, and that inherently is going to make sure that our stress levels come down. So I could have put sleep on its own, but I want to put it over here because it comes under this whole metabolic health kind of thing, okay? So when you get improved sleep, you're also going to help your mitochondria. So all of this has a mitochondria or link, that energy, the power within your cells in your body that deteriorates or becomes less efficient actually over time. And we're going to bring up its efficiency through the minimum amount of work for the maximum amount of results. And once you start to get your version of this being right, and now I can get to that point in a moment, then by default, your stress levels not necessarily going to come down. This isn't going to take away the stresses in your life. If you've got children, you're going to have stresses. If you've got a job, you're going to have stresses. What will happen is how you cope with them, how you respond to them, and internally, without you even knowing it, subconsciously, if you like. Again, I want to avoid using specialized terms. Please click the download if you want to go in a little bit more detail. Then you are going to be able to cope with them better, and your body is going to adapt, and your mind is going to adapt a lot better to those situations, and then you're going to start coping better. So it's not that we necessarily bring your problems down. It's that I need to be realistic here. It's the fact that we can increase or improve or optimize the way your body and mind responds to the stresses of life. Now, for me, that would be the definition of health. is that you are able to deal with the stresses of life without overstressing your mind and body in the process of getting there. That's a lot of words, but ultimately when you break it down, all I've really said is we need to establish a clear goal for you. What is the goal? Now I'm pointing over here, I'm pointing to the center of the circle, now where they all overlap. Now that may be seen as optimal. It may be like you imagine that in that center point there, if you've got all of those things in check, that you have become Superman or Superwoman, whatever you have, that is what you've become. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about being optimal here. What I'm talking about, this center point here, means that you've achieved your goal. Everything is in line, not optimal, everything's in line to achieve the goal that you set out for yourself. So now I'm going to play out a few scenarios, okay? But quickly, on the subject of being optimal, I mentioned that in the goal. When you go and watch the goal or the drive video there, you'll see the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons of being in amazing, incredible shape, like an athlete. Think like an athlete at the top of your game. There are pluses and minuses to that. It can be very taxing and it can definitely increase stress. In fact, if everything's optimal in your life, I would say, unless you're an absolute outlier, stress is going to go up. So it's about finding that sweet spot, doing the minimum amount of work for the maximum amount of results to get this right and ultimately be able to handle and adapt to stresses that are going to happen in your life, particularly as you age. All right. So now we've got our little circles here that all collectively create metabolic health, all right? If you're saying that your metabolic health is terrible, your health is terrible, you just feel down, or you definitely feel like life is going down, and I don't mean that in terms of the fact that you're getting older, I mean that in terms of you just feel nothing like you used to feel like. Now you've got the most to gain from this. If you're somewhere in the middle, you have a lot to gain for that. And what I mean by that is you feel okay, but you definitely don't feel like you did in your 20s. We can still look at all these factors. All right. So as I said, I'm not going to break each one down because I've done a video on each one that goes in more detail. So what we're now going to analyze, this would be the process. I'm going to take you through step by step what you should do. All right. First things first is you need to establish your goal. I've said that before, I'll say it again. You need to establish what does this center point look like for you, and it will be unique for you. I'm going to play out a couple of scenarios. So if someone comes to me and they established that their goal was, okay, I eat okay, fine. My weight, I could do with losing a little bit of weight, maybe 10, 15 pounds. I'm fairly strong. I'm not at all mobile. I have lower back pain constantly. And when I run up the stairs, I feel all right, but way more out of breath than I'd like. All right, so let's unpack that quickly, okay? So I've established that probably nutrition is not too bad because it didn't come high on that list. But we did mention there about the fact that someone wants to lose weight. And also had the fact that they feel fairly strong. So this would indicate to me that they do some form, maybe they go to a gym, maybe they have a home gym, they train in some sort, and they're okay with their diet, but it's very haphazard. It's just whatever, they're doing whatever, and it's kind of working, but it's just not working great. This is what I would focus on if this was the case here. I would look at this and bear in mind what they said about the stairs as well, okay, so that they get slightly out of breath. So this is what I'd actually look for. I would really look for, first off, I wouldn't actually look at the nutrition here, first off. I would do that after something. First off, what I would look for here is to work on the conditioning, because if ever I hear someone say that that doesn't feel like it's great, i.e., you know, they might run upstairs and they just feel out of breath or the heart rate doesn't feel good, I'm going to tackle that first because I know you're going to get the most returns for your goal here. We're going to take bigger steps towards it without taking too many steps out of our comfort zone. Okay, that wouldn't always be my approach. because it depends on what the person says here. But if they say that, then I'm going to be tackling that conditioning first, with a real specific goal of improving their aerobic capacity, meaning how well their lungs work. I'm going to put this in really basic terms without getting complicated. Just how their heart works and your lungs work, and just feels like the body's more efficient. Why am I going to do that? Because that is ultimately going to give the biggest bang for your buck in terms of improving your mitochondria. And that is ultimately going to give you more energy. It's going to work well for your body. And contrary to belief, and this is where there's an important part here, it isn't going to take away all your strength. Because sometimes cardio can be boo-booed for the fact that it's going to take away all your strength. The way that cardio will take away a lot of your strength is if you carry on doing an excessive amount of strength work, and then you add in an excessive or overly maintainable amount of cardio. Now you are going to lose strength, but there's going to be a reason why you're going to do that. And that's ultimately because collectively you're overtraining, you're overdoing everything. And when you overdo everything, you overflow your cup, so to speak, of you've got more coming out than you could ever come in. That doesn't mean that you're losing weight. It just means that you are just tired the whole time. You're doing too much. Now you've increased the stress on the body. And ultimately, it's not that cardio will take away your strength gains. It's that when you add it in and collectively put all those things together, it's overwhelming, it's too much. Now you are going to be taken away from the body. And let me tell you, the body's way of dealing with this is to take away muscle. It's not optimal for living. It's not optimal for surviving. So when you're under stress, this is where your body is going to take away, like the fat, the body fat. That's seen as a safety mechanism. It's a survival mechanism. We want to keep that. So that is where that is going to tip out of favor, probably with your goals, particularly as this person said they want to lose some weight. Now, essentially what I'd assume they want to lose is not weight, they want to lose body fat. So now we're working against ourselves. So this is how I would depict this situation now I've just explained that. And I'm going to do 2 more scenarios, and that will cover just generic stuff, okay? So in this case, I would look to put in a suitable conditioning plan, an aerobic plan that isn't too much, a minimum amount for the maximum amount of returns. Now I'm going to keep coming back to that, okay? I will probably tweak their strength training and make it just a little bit more mobility orientated. Now that doesn't mean that everything comes down and the weight comes down, etc. It just means that we start working with more control, more range of motion, so that we can tackle 2 things at once here. Now this person said they had lower back pain, and generally, if I was to elaborate a little bit, don't feel entirely sort of stretchy or mobile or flexible. So therefore we can tackle both of those in one go. We can tweak the training in such a way that we are looking to improve the mobility as well as without hindering the strength, I should say. Okay, so we can get the best of both worlds. Now by taking this approach, and we haven't even touched the nutrition yet, now by taking this approach, we have started to tick a few boxes. We've started to work on that lower back pain. We haven't lost too much strength, and particularly if they've been training for a while, you can really bring down your training here and maintain your muscle mass. It's actually an amazing thing about muscle mass and muscle memory, etc. But we've upped our aerobic, or in this case aerobic, VO2 optimizing or improving training mechanisms that works around the life that's maintainable and manageable. And now we're starting to color in some of those boxes a little bit more. The conditioning maybe wasn't colored in too much. Now it's colored in a bit more, but we're really starting to tackle that pain and mobility one there. And by default, if we haven't changed our nutrition, we are essentially going to be burning more calories, but I don't really want to emphasize that because metabolic health is almost independent of any one thing, including calories. It's how everything comes together. Now, if we don't then, after them efforts, start to see the body fat start to drop off a little bit with some consistency, and now how do you do that? You have to measure to some degree. That doesn't mean that you have to track all your foods, although I do recommend it for a little period of time because it can be very much an eye-opener. You could just use a plate system. And again, I've done eating plans there that you could use and it would work perfectly well. But some form of measuring just for a little while to see, ultimately you can use clothes. That's a good way of measuring whether you are losing body fat. If we're not, then we will look to open up a little bit, see what's going on with nutrition. Where can we take out the little things that won't affect the life or swap things out that make it more efficient? All right. Now, I'm not going to go any more into that because, again, I've covered the nutrition side there and you can make those tweaks, you can make those changes. But I wouldn't hit the nutrition in this case first. I would go for the conditioning and the strength and the mobility with the ultimate goal of increasing the mitochondria in the body, or the good, the healthy, the super mitochondria in your body. Now, that is really going to help with your stress levels. And once you start coping with your stress is better, then everything starts to tick. And then, we didn't even mention about sleep there, I would also expect a little bit of an improvement in the quality of sleep. And ultimately, this starts to take that person closer to their goal. Okay, so that was very specific. So it seems like there's a lot to tick out there, but ultimately when we come down to it, if I broke this person down into procedures, I'd first off focus on their conditioning, I'd make a few tweaks to their strength training, and I'd let that run for a little while. And then if we didn't get the desired results on the body fat levels, then we'll look to add the minimal amount of changes or habit changes there to create the change that we want and they get to their goal. It really is that simple. Not easy, simple, but it becomes a lot easier when that goal means something to you. So it all comes back to how you do your goal. If you really focus on getting your goal right, you're going to have a hard time not succeeding. Now that's awesome. And I'm talking about when people are in their 40s and life seems to be against them. Now you start to feel better than you did in your 20s. How's that possible? Because maybe you were just doing whatever in your 20s and you got away with it. Now you're being a bit more smart about what you're doing, but you've still got a life. You're still able to work the 40, 60 hours a week that you do, maybe even more, because we're doing the minimum amount for the maximum amount return. Okay, let's have another scenario. I'll pick a really common one. This happens a lot. Particularly guys come to me and they might be, have their own business, etc., or they work for someone and they are incredibly stressed, overweight, might have an okay conditioning if they're in a physical job, but let's just assume that they're at an office-based job. Their conditioning, their heart health and their lung capacity is going to be pretty rubbish, and they probably go to the gym occasionally, or maybe they don't. Okay, let's really put it right down there. Let's put it down there at the bottom. Don't do any kind of strength training whatsoever, nothing at all. And the sleep is rubbish. Okay, essentially all of these need working on. Now what do I do? I'm still going to go for the conditioning first, but I'm absolutely going to look at doing it in a very minimal amount of way, because I know that aerobic capacity is an easy one to move the needle on. We can move it really, really quickly, because this is the thing. When you start strength training, yeah, you will see initial highs, but then things start to slow down a little bit. When you start working on your conditioning in a manageable way and using the means of conditioning that you enjoy, and that's key because you have to enjoy it, and there are so many options for that. Now you're going to start seeing those bigger gains. But on a hormonal level, you're really going to start to see the perks of your effort. But the most important thing for this kind of person, because they are so deconditioned, is to not overload them. This would be a classic type of person in this situation who would jump in on a 12-week transformation, go all in, and I guarantee you they'll fall all out of it, even if they achieve their goal. It's not a case of if, it's when. And worse than that, because they did it in such a stressful way and it stressed the body, they would actually probably produce more cortisol in the body. That would damage the mitochondria, so they'd actually come out the other side feeling worse, aging more, and ultimately in a worse place for putting in a lot of effort. This would be a classic scenario when someone's really at rock bottom there, where we go slow, steady, and methodical. And we would look to measure, really measure their aerobic capacity, starting point, and see how they build up. And within as little as 8 weeks, I would expect massive results with what seems like minimal amount of effort. I would implement, as part of the aerobic conditioning, I can implement a little bit of strength training. I can be clever here. We can add a little bit of strength training that's going to really boost their aerobic effort. So we're ticking 2 boxes at once, but the ultimate would be the aerobic. That's how I would sell this to the person, because it would be in line with their goal. This is where going to get you where you need to be with the minimum amount of disruption, because you're already stressed. We don't want to add extra stress to there. We want to add what I would call a eustress, something that's very positive, that's ultimately going to bring those stress levels down. So that's where I'll tackle that. Once we started to get that aerobic capacity up, then I know we're starting to make inroads, and we can measure that, and we should absolutely measure the aerobic capacity. I really, really do believe you should measure it. Otherwise, everything's guesswork. And that is not what you want. Do you need to measure it forever? No. But do you need to measure it till you get to a certain point? Sure. Then you'll find that sustainable amount, and then you can maintain that amount of activity once you get to that point where you're at, and maybe even lessen it to a degree. Okay, so now, then after that, I'll then look at what else is going on. I get them to reassess their goal, even if they're not entirely there. I'll be like, okay, let's have a look at this goal. We know we're ticking this box. Now let's start to focus on the nutrition. Now, please watch my nutrition video. Again, this is where I go through those checkpoints. Now, depending on where the motivation is, I might take an initial quick approach just to get a high from great results, and then reverse out of that. I don't want to call it a diet, reverse out of that approach into a more maintainable, sustainable approach that's also going to keep on progressing them towards their weight goals, or in this case, their body fat goals. So now we're going to start tackling that in a very practical way without it being overwhelming. It will be very small changes in this case. Remember what I said before, if we go all in on this type of person with everything, we're going to not put them in a good place. We're going to increase their stress. We're going to ruin their mitochondria, and ultimately their metabolic health will crash. Think The Biggest Loser, right? The Biggest Loser program. Just think that. And if you need to Google it, Google it. You'll see what I mean. You don't want to do that. It really doesn't work, never has worked, never will work. Will it work for the 12-week transformation and the lovely pictures? Sure. Will it work for you as a human being? No. I will come back to this in a moment though. So from there, that is what I'd focus on next. Now we would see how they're progressing. Actually, this would be a nice part where now we could do a maintenance level of style of coaching. And maybe in this case, if it was me working with them, I'd touch base with them every now and again when was convenient for them, and we'd see how they're going. And if we need to change the training plan a little bit in line with what they're doing, they'd make steady progression towards their goals. And ultimately, if we did that over a period of time, I don't know, let's say like 2 years, I would be 100% confident that person's metabolic health, the way they look, the way they feel, the way they move, and everything else would have improved insanely. And as a result, their stress levels won't necessarily come down. They may still have all the pressures from work, but again, how they deal with those stress levels, they would have adapted in such a way that they cope with their stress levels better. You see the pattern here. Okay, so I've run a couple of scenarios. I'm not going to keep doing this. What I'm now going to do is say that someone comes to me and say, in 12 weeks, I have to be ready because I'm doing a boxing match. I'm going to pick out a few scenarios. I've got a boxing match that I've taken on, charity boxing match, or I'm going on holiday and I absolutely need to look amazing, or I've got an operation coming and I need to get my weight down and get in shape in order that my recovery is going to be good. All right, now all of a sudden, now we are going to take more of that transformation approach because we have a definitive goal. Now I would look at these buckets a little bit more aggressive, or these circles. I would look at them a bit more aggressive. But the one I'm going to touch the least again is the sleep. Now I've done a very simple sleep plan that you can download, but it's the very basics out there. But ultimately, I will say this. You really need to look at the other factors here. It's a bit like the stress. The sleep can lag behind all these other factors. So once you start to address the real root cause of the problems, and ultimately it comes down to a lifestyle choice, then your sleep's going to improve, and then your stress is going to improve, and it's going to happen in that order. So this is how it really, really works. I'm giving you massive breadcrumb clues here on how to do this for yourself. And you can do this for yourself. This is what the 37 years of my life has been about in terms of work. And I've had everyone come to me. Now, I've had other scenarios where someone might come to me and say, my goal is to recover from my cancer. Whoa, okay, that's going to hit you. We can still go about it right. We can still tackle it. We define that goal. We make it clear. Now, clearly in that case, the goal might be survival. But maybe it's not survival. Maybe it's, I want survival, but I also want to have a life afterwards. Well, we do the groundwork now in order to get to those results. And I do that on a day-to-day basis. It could be anything. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It could be any form of cognitive decline. Again, I will still look, particularly in cognitive decline, to get up that aerobic capacity in a safe and effective way in order to build up that mitochondria, the healthy mitochondria, and that's going to help. As you can tell, I'm quite passionate about this, but it's because there is, as long as everything's presented and put out there and you open up and you define that goal, you can definitely then, that goal becomes your center point, your bullseye that you can absolutely nail. Absolutely. And what's really good, the more clearer you define that goal, the bigger that circle becomes in the middle, the easier the target is to hit. The more vague you are, the smaller it goes. Okay? I'm talking in analogies, but they work perfectly well because you'll be able to picture this in your head. So if someone comes to me, I'm just going to finish off that point, and they need to get in shape, we are going to go more aggressive on these aspects here. But ultimately, we're probably going to look in any of those scenarios to tackle definitely nutrition, of course, because a lot of those scenarios required weight loss or body fat loss, and conditioning we're definitely going to look at, because again, that's the lowest hanging fruit there, and we're going to look to increase strength. All right. So ultimately, that's what we're going to tackle. And if they mention pain, I'm going to look more heavily on the mobility side. However, a real smart training plan will encompass some form of mobility in there. So you would expect your strength training efforts, and indeed your aerobic efforts, to actually reduce your pain by default. So if I'm to look at the three keys out of this, and I did want to jump to this at the start, I would really look at conditioning, strength, and nutrition. And by default, I would expect, if it's done correctly, for your mobility to start to be impacted in a positive way, your sleep to be impacted in a positive way, and collectively, this is going to help you adapt to the stresses in your life. Mic drop if you rewind that and think about it. Okay? And when you've got the goal right, this all comes together. Now, for anyone listening who thinks this is overwhelming, remember what I say over and over and over. We will do the least amount possible for the maximum amount of results. The only time I will change that if someone comes to me, for example, and they have to have the operation, as I just said before, all of those scenarios where you need to be ready in a set amount of time, then what we're going to do is do the maximum amount of work with the maximum amount of results. But when I say maximum, we find the maximum levels that you can handle without overtraining or overdoing things or overstressing your life, because then it becomes a negative. But we're still going to do it. We're going to be very, very smart. We're going to pick on the best and most impactful things. So then you can get there in a right way, the smart way, without falling off a cliff on the other side. So I hope this made sense. And to make it really easy for you, I've broken down every single one of these, and there's downloads for you there. You can piece it together. If you need more information, you can reach out to me and I will help you. And if I can't help you, I will direct you to the person or persons who I think can help you. So it's a win-win for you. Who do I help the most? Realistically, if someone's coming to me, they're looking to be more active in life as they age. So they're looking to increase their health span, not necessarily their lifespan. This will be my last little point, okay? Health span means your quality of life. Now, genetics are going to play a large role as to how long you live in life. But to a point, once we start looking around that 80-year-old threshold, then 75% of what you do, your lifestyle and what you choose to do, your activity levels are going to have an impact on how well the quality of life is during those years. Now, for me, I'd much rather live to 90 and still be jumping out of airplanes at 85 than I would living to 110, but living in a old person's home or in a bed from the age of 70 onwards. So health span would be the quality of life. And that is essentially what I bring to the table. As you can tell, and if you don't, I will tell you, I'm not the biggest guy in the world. I would describe myself as athletic build. If you want to get strong, crazy strong power lift, I'm not your guy. I could train you, but I'm not your guy. I would direct you to someone else. But if you want to have a good amount of muscle mass, but athletic ability, leaner, toned, more athletic, performance good, be able to jump up and down, keep up with the kids, this, that, and the other, I am your guy. That is what I specialize in. And also pain reduction as well, because I have a physio background too. So these are my expertises, and nutrition for sure. I go about it more in a behavior change way so that it doesn't feel so restrictive on your life, and you start to make these nutritional changes in a way that impact your life and give you maximum amount of energy. So thank you for listening to this. Now, please go down. The first port of call will be to define your goal. From there, you're then going to know which one of these that you should tackle first in light of what I've just said. But I've gave you a big hint here. A lot of the time, the biggest needle mover is going to be your aerobic capacity. Even if you want to put on muscle, just bear in mind that when you do your conditioning and your strength work, that it doesn't overflow your bucket of energy, so to speak, i.e. you doing too much, because then you will start to lose muscle for the reasons I said before. It's a survival mechanism. The body doesn't need the muscle to survive. But then you're gonna, if you get the balance right, and you will, then you're gonna start to improve your bone density and all of these other perks that come with it. But ultimately, the optimal level for you is defined by your goal. It's not about being the optimal athlete in life. And if you want to establish how I feel about that and where the pluses and minuses are of that, then please check out the goal section that I've done there, or find your drive, because there, once you find your drive, you're going to find your goal, and then you are really setting yourself up for success. So thank you for listening to this. I hope you found it useful. This is invaluable advice. And if you found it useful, you know someone who will find it useful, please forward it on. Please give me your feedback, and please reach out. I don't bite unless it's lunchtime. And as I say, I will help you help yourself to your goals and achieve them. And if I can't help you, I will direct you to someone or some people who will help you.